There are talents that span the course of a short title reign. Then there are those who define their division with dominance. But every once in a while, a star will surpass this sport, entering the zeitgeist one brutal knockout at a time. Alex Pereira's journey to transcend MMA is one that broke the UFC.
Shama.
Everybody knows he is working with some shamanics, with some shamans.
At the end of the day, no one knows who he is.
And it all started 37 years ago. Sao Paulo, Brazil. The favelas. Alex Pereira's home.
Bom, eu nasci na periferia, né? No bairro Destined, em São Bernardo do Campo, São Paulo. Uma vida difícil, uma infância não muito boa.
Alex abandoned school as a young teenager.
Difícil, né? 7 filhos. Pô, morava num lugar assim, umas condições muito assim difíceis, também que é muito precário, lugar simples, onde não.
He eventually finds work in a tire shop, but he is often not paid with money, but instead alcohol, a bad habit that quickly becomes a
Tem
lifestyle.
muita responsabilidade, mas também mudou muito assim a minha vida. Tava no meio assim de adultos, né? Pessoas que acertavam, erravam, tinha vício, né? Outros não tinham vício. E aí ali a gente acabou aprendendo coisas ali que não foi legal pra mim, assim como a bebida.
At age 18, Alex's brother is not so lucky. He passes away due to drug and alcohol abuse. He becomes a statistic.
Infelizmente acabou indo pro lado errado e não tá aqui com a gente mais.
Né? Quando foi relação com o quê? Com droga. Vocês eram próximos nessa época?
Muito próximo.
The favelas, an unforgiving and deadly place to grow up, with no hope of a better life, stuck on the corner of a street fitting tires, drinking away the nights, and the harsh memory of his brother's tragic death lingering in the corners of his mind. Alex knew that something had to change, something had to give lest he be consumed by the palpable darkness that coats the favela's very streets. It was in sport that he would find a savior.
E chegou um certo ponto, né? Já tinha com 18 anos de idade, 19, já pensava assim, como que eu vou parar com essa bebida, né? E aí os anos foi se passando, onde eu falei, pô, eu tenho que, sei lá, fazer um esporte, o esporte é o que salva.
Those in the training rooms with him quickly noticed his skills and natural ability in the sport, and before you knew it, his coaches were pushing him to compete for some extra money. Little did everyone know that what they were encouraging was to be one of the greatest fighters of this era. Alex climbs to incredible heights early in his career. He has fought 26 times and won all but 2 of them, many coming by way of knockout. He is now headlining an event for another chance at another middleweight title. He owns many. What looks like an inspiring climb out of the favelas to standing under the brightest of lights in kickboxing history is but a guise. Alex is still suffering. He is still drinking. The demon still has its claws sunk deep into him. He is in a fight, but he is losing. A body shot, he goes down to the canvas. He stands back up, but nothing can change the course of the fight. A leg kick, and the fight is over. It is this fight that made Alex look inward, but life cannot be conquered by one's own self. Everyone needs a mentor, and it is Alex's coach Pereira who would change his life forever. When Alex needed him most, he became a guiding light. Pereira had this to say after his most recent loss. I could see that in him, given my indigenous background, that he was fragile due to the drugs and alcohol. He never mentioned drugs to me, but you don't have to say, right? I never asked him either. Everybody deserves a second chance. I was training him in the ring one day, trying to teach him some difficult moves. I was pushing him hard, so I punched him right in the stomach, and he went down. I thought to myself, fuck, he's weak. Am I wasting my time with him? He was back up seconds later, and I saw tears in his eyes. I realized he wasn't weak. He was a warrior. He was just rotten inside due to the things he used. He was contaminated. It wasn't easy to turn him into what he's become. His coach Pereira put together a ritual and a special indigenous concoction used for healing. for detoxing and cure, all in an attempt to rid Alex's body of this most crushing of diseases. The ceremony saved Alex's spirit, and it was during this time that it came to light that, unbeknownst to himself, that Alex was in fact a descendant of an indigenous tribe himself. His grandparents were a part of the Poatan tribe. In Rebirth, Alex had changed. He had shed his old, sickly skin and become Poatan, a word in his ancestors' language that translated to hands hard as rocks. His coach would say, he had no idea what it meant to be indigenous. I started bringing back the spirit of his ancestors with dances, bringing the mind and spirit together. Alex would fully embrace this aspect of his bloodline, honoring those that had come before. This newfound relationship with spirits once lost to him helped heal his mind and keep him away from the bottle. With his connection restored to the earth, to his people, to his roots, Poatan returned to kickboxing, and the highlights quickly started adding up. He would as well, in his renewed sense of self, transition to MMA, dipping his toes for the first time in another sport. It was something a lot of kickboxers were doing at the time, presumably because it was becoming pretty obvious that there was more money to be made in the sport compared to kickboxing. In his debut, he'd be taking on a relative unknown in the form of Quimel Otoni, and unfortunately, Alex would be choked out after surviving 3 rounds, losing his professional debut in the sport. A sobering reminder that other skills are essential for success in MMA. Kickboxing excellence alone is not enough to conquer this frontier, but Alex didn't feel too down on his luck. Many pro MMA fighters lose their first bout. This was naught but a minor hurdle. 2015 came to a close, and the new year brought with it an interesting opportunity. First, Alex would start the year with a win inside of MMA. A fantastic knockout. But then, on the 2nd of April, nestled in the middle of an organization's debut card based out of China, 2 men would battle it out in a 3-round affair, a fight that, even to the most hardcore of kickboxing fans, was deemed extremely obscure. Poatan would be taking on Israel, the Black Dragon Adesanya, a kickboxer on the rise, with incredible talent.
Minha primeira luta com a Adesanya foi na China, foi uma luta dura. Mas eu estava no começo da minha carreira.
I felt like I handily won.
After a technical fight, the pair would make it all the way to the judges' scorecard. Adesanya had clearly outworked the Brazilian, but for some reason, even to the shock of Alex himself, Poatan would have his hand raised instead.
You can even see in our faces, he thought he lost the fight, but then when his hand got raised, we were surprised, and I was surprised.
To act like this was controversial, though, would be a lie. There was no fan dissent. There was no avid discussion online. It was just another bullshit decision in a fight on the fringe of the sport. Only one man truly cared, and he was out for revenge. After beating Izzy in the controversial decision, Alex would creep back into MMA one more time, knocking out Marcus Vinicius de Silveira in the 2nd round and taking his record in the sport as a professional to 2-1, but this would be the last time we would see Alex with 4-ounce gloves on for a long while. He was headed back to kickboxing, and he needed to settle the score with a man calling for a rematch.
For the 2nd fight, that was in Brazil.
Recebam Alex!
Tava um round meio que igual, como a gente foi pro segundo, até a metade do 2º round também tava meio que igual, aonde ele conectou umas mãos.
I put him on skates. But then the referee saved him and gave him an 8 count to rest. Because what? We're in his hometown in Brazil. In the 3rd round, he had some gusto, picked it up because he was down 2 rounds.
2 golpes, né? Ele saiu do primeiro, mas o segundo, né, que é o cruzado de esquerda, entrou e não teve jeito.
I woke up. I was like, oh shit, okay, let me try and get up. Fuck, my arms just felt like noodles. And then this kid, this fucking little shithead, again came over next to me and just laid on the ground, just like, and I thought to myself,
mock you?
Yeah, I was just stomp his face, but like, nah.
How old was the kid?
7. I don't give a fuck.
Oh.
If you can crawl, we can brawl.
O vencedor, Alex!
Alex had finalized the stylebender's time in the sport of kickboxing for good. His dreams of being a dominant kickboxing world champion were exhaled one agonal breath at a time as he lay unconscious on the canvas in Brazil. There was no controversy this time. There was no corrupt judge. There was only the mockery and disrespect of a young son who found humor in the broken dreams of a talented professional fighter. This was something that would be burned into Izzy's memory and something that will become relevant once more in years to come. But from here, these two warriors' journeys split at a fork in the road, one left for the UFC and the other concentrated on dominance in the world of kickboxing. After the Glory of Heroes promotion shut down due to funding issues, Alex signed permanently with the not to be confused with promotion Glory, a company that Alex had already battled it out in a couple of times previously. It was an international organization that was born in 2012 and had, for what it's worth, put some legitimacy back into the world of kickboxing. With K1 suffering with financial difficulties in 2011, Glory sought to take over, and to be honest, it did just that. It is now comfortably looked at as the best kickboxing organization in the world, with one of the deepest talent pools that can be offered for the sport, and Alex was primed to take over, one knockout at a time. Over the course of 3 years, Alex would become the first Glory double simultaneous kickboxing world champion, the middleweight title, and the interim light heavyweight belt suspended on each of his shoulders. Alex had become a true superstar in the sport of kickboxing. During this time, an old rival had been rising to the top of the UFC, and along the way, had talked a lot of shit.
Even the same guy now he watches all my fights, and every time I fight, like clockwork, he'll try and put something out like, I beat this guy. But I've never ever watched any of his fights, ever. So at the end of the day, no one knows who the fuck he is. And he's gonna be that guy when I'm world champion, when I'm a legend. He's gonna be at some pub, talking some shit about, I beat that guy one time. Trying to get it sucked from a crack, some shit.
That interview had lived in Alex's head rent-free for a while, and see, Izzy's rise to the top of the sport over the years must have finally snapped something inside of Alex, because in 2020, it was announced that Poatan would return to the sport of MMA for the first time in over 4 years, and would be taking on Thomas Powell in the main event of LFA 95 in a middleweight MMA bout.
You know there's a bad guy, and then there's this ultimate bad guy. And then Izzy had to open his mouth.
During the build-up to this fight, longtime UFC vet and top light heavyweight contender Glover Teixeira called in the help of Alex to come in and serve as a training partner for his upcoming fight against Thiago Santos. The two hit it off straight away. Alex had finally found a master of the sport to hone his own skills in MMA. All of this training, this new fight, this move to America to train with Glover, it was almost as if Alex wanted to prove something to the man talking shit in interviews, but there is still no better way to make a statement than inside of the cage. His fourth MMA fight rolled around.
Over and out!
The knockout was as cold as they come. Alex's signature left hook put Powell into the shadow realm face first. It was an ominous message to send to Adesanya.
If Izzy just shut the fuck up, he would have stayed where he was.
The Brazilian, more than likely, was about to chase his former foe into another sport. Just 2 months later, after the KO of the Year candidate, Poatan would find himself taking on the undisputed light heavyweight champion in kickboxing. Artem was finally ready to defend his throne, and Pereira was more than ready to claim the true belt. Their fight would take place in Rotterdam in a close, technical, and exciting back and forth fight. Pereira would edge out the Russian in a split decision, cementing himself as the true first historic Glory double simultaneous kickboxing world champion, a truly incredible and special title to hold. Alex had found his home in the heavier weight class. The struggles of cutting down to 185 was something that he wanted to leave in the rearview mirror, and so, a few months later, the organization would strip him of his middleweight title in order to give athletes in that division more opportunity. Due to the split decision, a rematch was inevitable, and just 8 months later, the pair would stand across from each other once more. This time though, the Russian proved to be the better man on the night, and Pereira, in just 1 calendar year, would go from the king of 2 divisions to a contender in only 1. The question became, what could compare to conquering 2 divisions in a sport? Understandably, there were lingering questions as to what motivated the Brazilian at this point. He had done it all, and so his next move would be unsurprising to say the least.
Hello guys, now it's official. UFC, thank you. I'm so happy to be part of the family.
Just 2 days after his loss, Alex would sign with the UFC on the 6th of September 2021. His time in kickboxing had officially come to a dramatic end, stripped of the middleweight title and ultimately losing the light heavyweight strap inside of the cage. Now his sights were firmly set on a career in MMA, and he had somewhat been fast-tracked to a place in the top organization by joining the UFC after only 4 professional fights in the sport, one of which he had actually lost. I guess that the UFC wanted to liven things up by introducing someone that had formerly defeated the current middleweight champion. Needless to say, things were pretty stale in the division, and Adesanya needed someone to create a decent storyline with. Poatan's highlights were terrifying to say the least, and his historic climb to becoming Glory's first double champion was enough of a selling point to get fans interested. The question was, could he do the same inside of the 8-sided crucible? Well, November would provide the first glimpses to what was possible, as it was announced that he would be taking on somewhat decent competition in Andreas Michailidis, scheduled as the headliner of the prelims at UFC 268, a stiff test for a debutant and a fantastic opportunity to create buzz with his featured spot on the card.
Don't trust this guy to win this one. I think the grappling is going to be a big problem. Andreas knows what he needs to do. He'll go out there, he'll grapple with Pereira, and I think Pereira is going to fail at the first hurdle.
This man is a monster. One of the most feared strikers to ever fight in kickboxing.
That left hook of his just does not make sense. When he throws it, it doesn't look like he's throwing it that hard, but it's a death punch. It's just an off switch. He lands out on you and he shuts you off.
Gets the fight to the ground. He's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
This is a guy who has fought Israel Adesanya twice in kickboxing and knocked him out cold.
Alex Pereira is the boogeyman to Israel Adesanya.
You cannot stand in front of that man. That power is different.
Alex entered the UFC like a bulldozer and put every single middleweight on notice. The UFC were not playing games, and 4 months later, his next fight was announced, an exciting matchup against 22-6 MMA vet Bruno Silva.
Scorecards, all 3 have it 30-27. Your winner by unanimous decision, Alex Poatan Pereira!
Just a week after his technical performance against the tough Bruno Silva, it was reported that Alex would be taking on Sean Strickland, a huge jump in competition for the unranked Brazilian, who would now be taking on the shit-talking number 4 ranked American on a 6-fight winning streak that included some of the best talented middleweight, the likes of Jack Hermansson and Brendan Allen. The jump in competition really spoke to the faith the UFC had in Alex's potential, and by this point, many fans of the sport also brought into the hype. Alex's first fight in the UFC was the headliner of the prelims of a pay-per-view, and his second was opening up the main card on a fight night. The UFC were planting the seeds of a star. The fight with Sean would eventually be confirmed to take place at UFC 276 in November, and well, the interesting thing about that is that the main event would feature Israel Adesanya's 5th defense of the middleweight title against longtime UFC vet Jared Cannonier. The UFC were clearly setting up that the winner of Alex and Sean would be the next in line for the title, and well, what better way to sell that talking point than having them all on stage together during media week? What would transpire is probably one of the most entertaining press conferences of all time.
You know, and after me and him have a war and I, beat Alex, you're gonna see I'm a whole different guy. I'm gonna start painting my nails, act like a female. I'm gonna be wearing sunglasses inside. You know what I'm saying? This will be different, bro. I'm gonna go get me suits. That man was the one that slept that man, so next to me, probably Alex. I mean, what was it, like 2-0 against Izzy? What was it, 2-0?
Did you watch the whole fight?
No, I don't watch
Exactly, do your job next time.
Oh man, I made the champion mad with his frosted tips and his gay little watch. No man that beats off the cartoons is gonna beat me.
Bro, trust me. I can tell you what, if you win this fight, when we fight, I knock you out, I'm gonna do a TikTok dance over your grave.
Oh, look at this grown-ass man on TikTok. Maybe that's the problem, bro.
And the
you don't want this guy's a champion.
Do something about it.
You don't want this guy as a
Do
champion.
something about it.
In your mind, I mean, I know you're still very new to the UFC, but is this a #1 contender fight? Does the winner fight for the title?
Yeah, this is the fight that's gonna give me a chance to fight for the title.
Nice.
He's not even a good striker, bro. Like, what is Pereira? Like, dude, the only reason to do that is because you're tall, man. You're genetically gifted. If you were a normal-sized human being, you wouldn't even be here. Your style sucks.
In your mind, I mean, I know you're still very new to the UFC, but is this a #1 contender fight? Does the winner fight for the title?
Essa é a luta que vai me dar a chance de lutar pelo cinturão.
Nice. Last thing for me, given that, what is your goal here? I mean, is it just to pick up a win by any means necessary, or do you want to do something, a highlight reel, something spectacular to solidify that you get that shot?
Eu quero ganhar, não importa como, né? A gente está lutando MMA. Estou disposto a tudo, estou treinando tudo, minha evolução tá enorme, então o importante é sair com a vitória. Para ser sincero, eu sempre venho falando isso.
Ladies and gentlemen, referee Jason Herzog has called a stop to this contest at 2 minutes, 36 seconds of the very first round. Declaring the winner by knockout, Alex Poatan.
Is Alex the fight you want next? And if so, when do you want it?
Yes, when do I want it? We've got a date.
Alex's devastating and emphatic win had propelled him from unranked to 4th in the world over Sean Strickland, and that performance was juxtaposed by yet another dull and boring performance from the stylebender, a man who before stepping into the cage had promised to deliver Costa levels of technicality and forward pressure.
I honestly feel like the way I touch him and the amount of times I touch him, he's not going to survive.
This pay-per-view, however, had only served to widen the fissures in fans' distaste for Adesanya. Not only had his personality started to distort, but his performances had become safe and uninspired.
But I hate eating my own words. I'm like, fuck. And I won the fight. It was a good fight, but I just hate, like, I could have done better.
It was easy to see why fans were jumping ship to a rising contender who threatened his popularity. Alex was menacing, exciting, and well, just kind of new. We all missed the old Izzy, the chop up the soul Izzy, set on his goals Izzy. I hate the new Izzy, the spaz in the news Izzy. Personally though, I'd remained a fan of him throughout this time. I respected him for being ruthlessly comfortable with who he was and not afraid to display that to the world. And at the end of the day, who are we to cast judgment on him? But even with all that said, I can still admit that he was for sure doing stuff that alienated the typical MMA demographic. Poatan, on the other hand, was doing everything that fans loved. For Alex, achieving victory on the same card as Izzy was just the nail in the coffin for their third clash in combat sports. Izzy was riding years of undefeated middleweight victory, his confidence levels unparalleled, and he was finally ready to put an end to that demon that had been lurking in the shadows, that man that he had claimed was a nobody, a man that he foresaw to be condemned to a dingy bar, haunted by memories of what once was. Reality provided a harsher truth though. Alex had stalked his prey all the way to the top of another sport. Some rivalries are fated, preordained dances of violence. Alex had ascended to challenger status in what was one of the fastest roads to a title shot possible in all but one calendar year. Pereira had found himself squaring off against the second most dominant middleweight champion of all time, but those two previous fights in a different sport had somewhat leveled the odds. Instead of being counted out of the fight completely, the fresh-faced and rather inexperienced challenger only clocked in as a plus 140 underdog. It spoke to just how much people believed that the first two bouts between the pair played influence over this one. Even in a different discipline, Adesanya was rather dismissive of the MMA up-and-comer. Izzy had been holding on to two excuses as to why he lost those original fights for the last few years, excuses that made him extremely confident going into the third matchup, and there is nothing more dangerous than a man who truly visualizes victory. Alex to Izzy was just another ruby in his championship belt yet to be realized, and I don't think that we had seen such a focused and determined Izzy in such a long time. He needed this.
I thought I won the first fight. And in the second fight, it was honestly on skates. The referee saved his ass because I was about to drop him. And in the third round, he comes out and knocks me out in his home country. That's a beautiful story for him. But I'm still here.
Did you keep an eye on his career after you guys fought, even though that you were going to MMA?
Nope, I never. He did. He kept an eye on my career. And how do you do that when you beat someone? But it's because they're doing way better than you in life.
One of the most ferocious fighters that has ever entered into the sport. The only glory, 2 division simultaneous champ. He knocks people into other dimensions.
Quando eu sou desafiado, ninguém me segura.
UFC undisputed middleweight champion of the world, Poatan Pereira.
Izzy had put on a masterful performance for essentially 5 rounds straight, only really losing the second round. In the first, he had even all but finished the fight himself, Alex being saved by the bell as the round waned to its conclusion. The last round of the bout was naught but ceremony, Izzy's victory lap, 5 minutes of playing it safe, and Izzy would be declared the winner. But this game is unforgiving. Fate's resting on a razor's edge. They say it only takes one punch, and nothing could have been truer. Adesanya had succumbed to his demon once again, 3-0. A complete shutout. The middleweight title, after 3 long years, had a new king to sit atop the throne, an unlikely man who had risen to the pinnacle of a sport with blinding speed, fueled by a ferocity that drowned his opponents. Who knows what was guiding Alex to achieve such unimaginable success in such a short space of time, but all I know is that it was truly one of the most incredible comeback performances that I had ever seen. What made it all so special too was seeing Glover so thrilled about his student claiming gold, as he once had too. The two of them had an unbreakable bond, one that just simply felt good, and something that the sport needed more of. I felt bad for Izzy in a lot of ways. It's hard to put yourself in the shoes of a man who had climbed effortlessly to the top of a sport, only to be dethroned by the very man that had cast him out of a previous one. But it was a good opportunity for fans to see how Izzy could deal with his first KO loss in MMA.
The huge or the ref, I was fine because I was still lucid. I was in there, but yeah, shit happens.
Does that mean that you're really not happy with the stoppage? That you feel like maybe
I talked to my coaches and I trust them, but I was fine. I knew I could see everything happen. My eyes might have rolled back a little bit, but I was lucid. Put it on the line, and this is what happens. Again, I dare to be great, and I am.
People were genuinely on the fence as to whether it was a late stoppage or not. For me, I feel like champions should be afforded the opportunity to go out if that's what they ask for. I've seen too many times fighters climb back from the brink of a loss, fighters who have lost any semblance of awareness, prevail, and even come back to win. Izzy was on his feet, ducking and dodging. Could have Alex put him out cold in the next shot? Probably, I'll agree, but we don't know that for sure. Alex could have been gassing, or Izzy could have been seconds away from clinching up and creating a scramble. We just don't know. Regardless, Alex rode the high of victory in one of the most prestigious sports, the belt brought back to his people, a celebration amongst a tribe of men and women who had battled for as long as stories had been told. Alex's victory, a new entry into their history. Izzy returned to the training room, licking his wounds, awaiting a return. And well, if people truly felt that there were lingering questions to be answered, then a rematch was inevitable surely. Well, UFC 287 would be the platform to extend this most beautiful and violent of rivalries. The rematch was on.
I want to play a game. I want to play a game. I want to play a game. The game is not over. It's hunting season. The hunted now becomes a hunter.
Falo pra vocês que a gente tem que esquecer essas 3 lutas que passaram, mas o Adesanya ele nunca vai esquecer essas lutas.
done with this talking. You guys want to hear me talk or you want to hear me fight?
Ele fez isso nas últimas 3 lutas. Ele falou a mesma coisa e não fez.
And what's going to happen this weekend is we're going to fight and see who the best man is at the end.
And for you, Izzy, on Saturday, what is most important to you? Is it about regaining the UFC title and being world champion again, or is it simply be
the belt? I'm coming for his head.
Here we go, boys. The intensity of this rivalry is so palatable and palpable and felt by everybody in this mixed martial arts arena.
I called it my 8-mile moment. You only have one shot. You're not gonna blow this one.
I baited him this one. I was like, okay, give it to him. And I was like, okay, bait him, just set.
Listen to me. I hope every one of you behind the screens or in this arena can feel this level of happiness just one time in your life. I hope all of you.
In what was one of the greatest knockouts of the year, and perhaps even the decade, Israel reigned supreme over his greatest rival. He then followed it up with a truly breathtaking and symbolic release of pent-up energy in the form of a bow and arrow celebration. Izzy had handed Alex his first ever loss inside the UFC and ended his short UFC title reign. But more than that, Izzy had finally got one back, 3-1. The demon was finally conquered. Izzy concluded the night with an inspiring post-fight interview. After knocking out Alex, Izzy found Poatan's crying son in the crowd, pointed at him, and then dropped to the floor in mockery, doing what the child had done to him years prior, something the community did in fact turn on him for.
Pointed at him and I saw him and I was like, hey. Just to remind him, I saw him backstage, we're cool.
Considering everything, they were now one apiece in MMA, and a rematch was the next obvious step, right? Well, Izzy saw it a different way. He suggested that he was now one up against Poatan, despite being 3-1 in total, and that Alex needed the rematch in order to balance the scales, and it was not something that he was willing to provide. I mean, what a confusing way to go about this. I don't really know what his point was. I don't think anyone did, really.
Be like, oh, it's 1-1 in MMA, there should be a trilogy.
I don't keep score, I settle them.
But now
it's settled.
Adesanya's attitude killed any momentum for the rubber match, and so now the story splinters. Izzy's second middleweight reign goes down one path, and Alex's journey in the UFC was now destined to wander down another. Their rivalry, for better or for worse, was over. So the question was, what was next for Alex?
Bom, pessoal, como prometido, vim aqui em primeira mão no meu canal vim dar a grande notícia. A minha próxima luta será nos 205. Isso mesmo, a minha próxima luta será nos 205. Vocês veem aí as provocações do Adesanya, né? Pós-luta, ele leva essa vitória como se tivesse 3-1, né, para ele. E não é bem assim, mas eu até entendo, ou tento entender a alegria dele, né? Agora o sonho dele ganhar uma vez de mim, ele conseguiu.
Alex had always been big for a middleweight, and so a move up to light heavyweight seemed like a sensible move, something that he had previously done in kickboxing to great success, and especially considering that Izzy wasn't interested in offering a rematch. Light heavyweight had been a mess for the last couple years, and so let's get you up to speed so that this video makes a bit more sense. Since John Jones vacated the title in late 2020, Jan Blachowicz had initially won the title, defending it once against Izzy's double championship attempt. He would then lose the title to Alex Pereira's coach and friend Glover. In Glover's first title defense, he would end up losing the title as well to the UFC's very own samurai, Jiří Procházka, and that was in the last 30 seconds of their 5-round title fight, in which the Brazilian was handily winning, just 100 160 days later after winning his title, Yuri would vacate it after injuring his shoulder. This was in the build-up to UFC 282, in which he was expected to face Glover in a rematch. Glover then refused to take a short-notice vacant title fight against longtime light heavyweight boogeyman Magomed Ankalaev. This then gave way for a vacant title fight to take place between Ankalaev and Yan. The pair would duke it out in a rather boring 5-round affair, which many felt that Ankalaev had clearly won. Well, to everyone besides the judges, of course, who decided that it was a draw, leaving the vacant title up in the air still. Dana, extremely pissed about both the challengers' performances with the title on the line, decided to put a bout together between Glover and number 7 ranked Jamal Hill in the very next pay-per-view a month later at UFC 283. In a surprise to everyone, Jamal Hill put on a clinic against the Brazilian, walking away with the title after a 5-round brawl. And then, just 170 days later, Hill himself would vacate the title with a ruptured Achilles tendon. And that brings us up to the current moment in the timeline. It was now just 2 weeks away from Alex's debut at light heavyweight in Salt Lake City, and he was going to be facing Jan Blachowicz. The winner of this match was clearly the A-side for yet another vacant title matchup. Alex was setting himself up for another extremely fast road to the UFC title, but a Polish berserker and a former champion stood in his way.
After 3 rounds, we go to the judges' scorecards for a decision. Derek Cleary scores the contest, 29-28, Pereira. Junichiro Kamijo scores the contest, 29-28, Blachowicz. And Rob McCarthy scores the contest, 29-28, for the winner by split decision,
Alex's win over the former light heavyweight champion and a man who had only just drawn in a title fight had perfectly set him up for a fight for the still vacant title. The UFC, still pissed with Ankalaev for some reason, had finally found the man to take on Alex in the title fight, the long-awaited return of a somewhat lineal light heavyweight champion. I'm coming! They were scheduled to scrap it out at UFC 297, originally as the co-main event, but eventually being promoted to the main event in Madison Square Garden because the John Jones and Stipe bout fell through due to injury, which was fine for me because this was the fans' main event. 2 of the best and relevant fighters duking it out in an actually competitive fight, all for the chance at 12.5 pounds of gold and leather. In just 763 days, Poatan had gone from a UFC debutant to not only a world champion, which would have been an incredible feat on its own, but now he was the 9th ever UFC double champion, a rare and private club reserved only for the greatest combatants on earth.
It's really now settling in how accomplished Alex Pereira is in MMA, being a 2-division champion.
His road to reaching this most esteemed and prestigious honor was not littered with easy tune-up fights, but instead some of the finest world champions this sport has ever known. It was a genuine and hard-fought road, done twice to the top of a ruthless and cutthroat sport. It spoke of the history-defining ability of the Brazilian. Alex had also vicariously managed to claim back victory for his master as well, who had lost to Yuri a year previously. The question was, at such an incredible high in an athlete's career, what could possibly be the next step? There was a lot of speculation building into UFC 300 as to what the main event could possibly be. People were expecting something huge, something incredible, something unprecedented. The return of Georges St. Pierre.
Are you intoxicated?
The return of Khabib perhaps. Maybe even Khabib versus GSP. Or maybe Conor McGregor. It had to be Conor McGregor surely. What about Brock Lesnar? Or even Ronda Rousey? As time went on, and none of these legends had hinted at any kind of return, hope started to dwindle. And so, people started to look elsewhere for their main event predictions, and one man started to be the main rumor. Poatan. He would cryptically post on Instagram this photo, 30 plus 300 equals 3. What did it mean? The people started doing the maths. What if it was a hint at something truly incredible, something truly historic? What if the numbers meant 30 pounds plus UFC 300 equals 3 UFC belts? That's right, with John Jones still injured. What if this was a hint at a true super fight against British interim heavyweight world champion Tom Aspinall? God, if it was true, what a spectacular main event it would be. Well, there was only one man to clear up the rumors, and finally, Dana White would tell hungry fans what the headliner of the greatest card of the decade would be.
And I'm going to announce the main event for UFC 300 right now. It will feature Alex Pereira defending his light heavyweight title against Jamal Hill.
Well, womp womp. What was provided for the main event for UFC 300 was in many ways a letdown for a load of fans. Our speculation as a fan base had gotten the better of us. Our anticipation for Dana to get oiled up had truly blinded us, and no matter what Dana could conjure up for the card, we were destined to be disappointed regardless. Alex versus Hill was an incredible fight, a unification of the light heavyweight throne. It was Hill's opportunity to cement his place as the deserving king of the division, or it was Alex's time to notch the first defense into his UFC title, making him one of the greatest fighters of all time. UFC 300 as a whole was actually kind of spectacular. The opening fight had Cody Garbrandt on it, in a super fight of sorts, former champ versus former champ. What more could fans ask for? The whole card itself featured 12 former UFC champions, and the matchups felt truly important and exciting. Well, for some reason Bo Nickel was on the main card for whatever reason, but personally, I was truly excited and hyped for the card, but even I can admit that I had for some reason expected more. My most anticipated fight though was definitely Max versus Justin. I didn't really care for the BMF title, a gimmick of sorts in my opinion, but those two men had been in my top 10 favorites for a long time and I couldn't wait for it. Fight week rolled around quickly and Jamal Hill was about to awaken something inside of Alex that we hadn't seen before.
For Jamal, the interesting choice of water bottle right there. Can you speak a little bit more about it?
Just getting acquainted with the visual that I plan on seeing on Saturday night.
Eu vou fazer ele lembrar desse momento aqui, quando eu estiver entrando no octógono, quando estiver tocando a minha música, ele vai lembrar desse momento.
Ain't nothing to talk about, ain't nothing to say, it's all right here and I'm on your ass.
UFC 300 lived up to all the hype that the number produced. From the opening bout to Renato Moicano's traditionally hilarious octagon interview, Kayla Harrison's statement of a debut, Yuri's rebound emphatic win over Rakic, and well, you all know what I'm going to talk about next. With the BMF title on the line, Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje clobbered each other for 5 rounds, and at 4 in the morning, hailing from the land of England, I was drifting slowly in and out of consciousness during the 4th and 5th. By some miracle of fate, I had managed to pin my eyelids open with just 20 seconds to go in the 5th. My brother, snoring next to me, he had succumbed to the torture that is staying up for a UFC event this side of the globe. Max, the man who was up on the scorecards, closed to the center of the octagon and pointed down at the canvas. It was happening. They were about to do the most BMF thing imaginable. Both men traded in the waning moments of the fight of the night bout, caution to the wind, and then just like that, the greatest moment in all my years of watching this sport had unfolded before my very eyes. A photo captured the moment, a photo that encapsulated everything that this sport stands for: the thrill and the agony, the winner and the loser, the expulsion of emotion as the realization that victory has finally been achieved after weeks and months of preparation, careful game planning and visualization, the understanding that perhaps this very moment will be remembered with reverence for years, and it was wrought onto the face of Holloway. It was, and is still, perhaps the greatest photo I'd ever seen. I stared at it on Instagram, posted just 5 minutes after Max winning. I picked up the remote and turned off the TV. The 2 fights to come couldn't ever exceed what had just transpired. Nothing more could be satisfied. I chose to go to bed. That photo burned into all recesses of my mind. I awoke the next day to discover that this is what had happened in the main event. If you didn't think that you could end up with two photos that will be remembered for the rest of history on the same night, then UFC 300 served to knock down that barrier. After a nut shot, courtesy of Hill, the pair would resume the fight after Alex brushed the ref aside. The action resumed, and a moment later, Alex would put Jamal back into challenger status and uncharacteristically mock the man that he had just beat, something that Hill had brought on himself by disrespecting the Brazilian in the build-up. With the victory, Alex had also avenged his mentor's loss along the way. What better storyline could you ask for? The loss for Hill would forever damage his ego, quickly going from a fan favourite to a man who is starting to annoy everyone with his constant excuses. He's probably playing a character, a Hill at this point, but it doesn't make it any less annoying. It's a shame because normally I empathise with denial. I think that those who are the best in the world need a way out to remain abnormally confident in their belief of their abilities, but Jamal was just delusional at this point. He may eventually get a rematch, but his path to getting there has tarnished his reputation with fans, the most damaging being when he walked up on Alex at a gym recently, and then, when provided with an opportunity to scrap, bottled it. Either way, Alex's win at UFC 300 just shot him further into the stratosphere in terms of fan popularity. The biggest pay-per-view of the decade was a platform that elevated him, and the whispers on the street were that of Charmer. In his post-fight interview, Alex once again hinted at his willingness and desire to move to heavyweight. Only time, I guess, will tell if he will make this much anticipated move. UFC 300 was certainly highly anticipated, but there was also another card on the not-so-distant horizon that promised to be one of the highest-selling pay-per-views of all time. McGregor was finally making a comeback after an over 2-year hiatus, injured with his titanium shin bone. He was taking on the hard-working, muscle-bound, physical manifestation of a Fight of the Night bonus, Michael Chandler, and if two men could sell a pay-per-view, it was these two. After a mildly entertaining and respectful stint on The Ultimate Fighter together as rival coaches, the pair was scheduled to square off at UFC 303, just 2.5 months after UFC 300. Disaster would strike the main event though. On June 13th, just 2 weeks before the card, Conor McGregor would injure his foot and be pulled from the card, and on extremely short notice, two warriors would be beckoned back to the cage. Poatan, the current light heavyweight world champion, and the lineal light heavyweight world champion, Jiří Procházka, both 2 months removed from their most recent outings. I mean, come on. If anyone was going to do it, it was a guy who dresses like this, and a guy who lives the samurai lifestyle. Jiří wanted redemption, and who knows what Alex wanted. Just to hurt someone, I think. Either way, 303 was back, and it was back in the best way possible. We would get to see them stare at each other from across the octagon once more.
Everybody knows he's working with some shamanics, with some shamans from his hometown.
Yeah.
Or he believes in some like spiritual help from them.
I saw him in his eyes. What he's doing, some technique, doesn't matter. I'm pure.
But let the higher power be there in the cage to see who's the best in the world, in the performance, in the pure performance.
Is that something you'll ask him to do, to face you without doing all of that to see who's the best?
Yeah.
Alex, just a few seconds into the opening of the second, would land a devastating head kick, knocking Jiří out and securing himself his second title defense. Taking fights on short notice is an extremely badass thing to do, something that gains fighters immortal respect from the MMA community, something that can be memed to death, joining the ranks of Alexander Volkanovski and Dan Ige as men who would wade into the fire on the drop of a dime. To do so as a champion, on top of all of that, is really just the icing on top of the cake. In a move that many felt like that the UFC were protecting their biggest and greatest star, on August 16th it was announced that Alex would be taking on number 8 ranked Khalil Roundtree, completely bypassing the man who should have become champ number 1 ranked Magomed Ankalaev, who actually had a fight himself just 2 weeks later in Abu Dhabi. It was a strange matchup to say the least, but there has long been rumors of Ankalaev's hard to deal with in negotiations, so this might be a good reason as to why he was snubbed once more for a title shot at light heavyweight gold. I don't know, I'm not the matchmakers, and to be honest, Khalil always puts on a show. The fight rolled around quickly, and it did not disappoint. Constant back and forth action that almost saw Khalil claim gold. But close doesn't cut it in this game. Alex would rally in the championship rounds and claim victory after an absolute beating in the 4th. Khalil's face got destroyed and Alex had the belt wrapped around his waist once more. His 3rd title defense secured. In news that at this point isn't even shocking, it was reported that a few weeks out from the pay-per-view, Alex had actually fought off a fever and a cough with antibiotics, medication known to severely impact the performance of athletes during bouts. That explained his coughing in between rounds and his uncharacteristically slow and plodding performance in the first couple rounds. At the time of writing this video, it is now reported that Alex will face Ankalaev later this year at UFC 313. Ankalaev is considered by many to be Alex's greatest threat, and only time will tell if he can prove the doubters wrong. And I guess there is only one thing that can be said for this athlete. He is truly special and remarkable. In just 2 years of joining the UFC, he had become not only a 2-division world champion, a feat that I doubt will ever be conquered again, but he had also done it with very little English speaking skills and become a superstar despite it, saving pay-per-views on a moment's notice and fighting multiple times a year, even as a champion. In a time where it was looking like the sport was directionless and leaderless in the wake of McGregor's departure, Ronda's leaving, and Jones' inactivity, Alex swooped in and brought true excitement and savagery back to the sport for me. And if I was a betting man, I would say that if anyone can make it happen, Alex might just be the first ever 3-division world champion, a feat many consider impossible, but with his ancestors' spirits at his back and a lifetime of struggle and victory to guide him, anything is possible. Charmer.